Long before the sun reached the horizon, when the facility was still cloaked in blue-gray shadows, an old man moved soundlessly through the halls of Raven Rock Training Facility. His presence was barely more than a breeze, light, constant, unnoticed. He wore the same uniform every day, faded gray coveralls, a mossy green hoodie pulled up over thinning hair, and a pair of boots whose soles whispered across the concrete. He carried a cleaning cart with the efficiency of a soldier and the silence of a shadow. His name tag simply read Ward. No first name. No rank. Just that. To most, he was a ghost with a mop, a relic whose purpose was maintenance. Recruits gave him nicknames: Ghost Janitor, Mop Ninja, Gramps. The jokes never reached him. Or if they did, he never reacted. He moved as if born from the walls themselves, always appearing in the right place before anyone arrived and gone before anyone noticed. What no one saw was how his eyes scanned every hallway with precision. How his hands, though weathered and calloused, moved with a kind of martial grace. When he polished the mirrors, he checked angles. When he swept under benches, he always knew what was left behind. He never interrupted, never interfered. Until one morning. Logan Pierce, a trainee in his second week, arrived early to the indoor bay. He was trying to impress the instructors, trying to outwork everyone. As he dropped his duffel by the door, he caught a glimpse of Ward standing near the far end of the room, adjusting a mat. The hood was down. And just behind Ward's right ear, etched in ink, was a tattoo. A dagger thrust through a raven's skull. Logan froze. He had seen that symbol once before, during an orientation slideshow that quickly skipped over Tier 1 operatives. The mark wasn't official. It wasn't supposed to exist. But in the rare circles where such men were whispered about, it carried the weight of death and legend. That morning, Logan said nothing to Ward. But at lunch, he leaned into a few of his fellow trainees and whispered what he'd seen. "Do you sure?" someone asked. "I saw it clear as day. Right behind his ear. That symbol." By dinner, the story had made its way through the mess hall like a crack through ice. The laughter around Ward stopped. The instructors, especially Captain Rourke, began to watch him differently. Rourke, a former operative himself, stood frozen when he overheard the rumor. That symbol. He hadn't seen it in over 15 years. And the last time he had, the man wearing it disappeared during an off-the-books operation. No name. No burial. Just gone. Now, that same symbol was scrubbing benches and wiping down sweat from mats. From that day on, every footstep Ward took echoed louder. Not in volume, but in meaning. Recruits straightened when he passed. Instructors paused. Something unseen had shifted. But Ward didn't change. He never spoke. Never explained. He just kept working, cleaning, polishing, arranging. Except now, every single person in Raven Rock had started to wonder. Who is he really? And what kind of war must a man survive to return to silence? Trial by fire. The night was suffocating. Dense fog rolled down from the hills and pooled into the valley where Raven Rock stood like a silent beast. Most of the recruits had already retired to their barracks after a grueling day. The compound was quiet. Then the alarm shattered the stillness. A violent shriek of steel and sirens cut through the night. Emergency strobes bathed the corridors in red light. The unmistakable crackle of fire was followed by chaos, shouts, scrambling boots, the distant sound of a sprinkler system failing to activate in one of the older training annexes. Flames had erupted in Wing B. Inside the smoky maze, Logan Pierce had been finishing a solo endurance challenge. No one had noticed he hadn't come out. And now, that part of the compound was swallowing itself in heat and smoke. Captain Rourke was barking orders. Evacuation was underway. Fire crews were on their way, but time was a cruel master. And then, through the blur of panic and steam, a shape peeled away from the shadows. Ward. No helmet. No radio. No protection but the hoodie on his back and a soaked rag wrapped across his mouth. He slipped through the crowd and disappeared into the blaze before anyone could stop him. Inside, smoke churned like ink and water. Visibility was near zero. But Ward moved with eerie certainty, low to the ground, using the rhythm of the flames and the gaps in the heat like a map. He found Logan collapsed near a collapsed beam, coughing, barely conscious. Without a word, Ward hoisted him across his shoulders in one smooth, practiced motion. Outside, a cluster of trainees stood frozen at the glass doors. They watched as, through the firestorm, two silhouettes emerged, one walking, the other slung over his back. The doors swung open, and smoke burst outward with a scream. Ward stepped into the red light, eyes focused, gait unwavering. He laid Logan down gently before collapsing to one knee, then rising again as if nothing had happened. Not a word. Rourke stepped forward. His voice cracked slightly as he ordered a medic to check Logan. Then he turned to Ward. "Who are you?" he asked under his breath, low enough that only the older man could hear. Ward met his gaze. No emotion. Just something ancient in his eyes. A furnace that had long gone cold. "Just a cleaner," he said. Rourke shook his head. No. No, you're not." Later that night, while the rest of the facility returned to uneasy sleep, Rourke went into the administrative archives. It took him an hour, a clearance override, and a sealed envelope from a box labeled classified, deceased. Inside was a faded personnel file. The photo was younger. The eyes were not. Jonas Ward. SEAL Team 6. Presumed Kia. But that wasn't the man cleaning the mats. He was alive. And hiding in plain sight. The fire had done more than trigger the alarms. It had awakened something deeper than protocol. For the first time, recruits spoke of Ward with reverence. Not janitor. Not ghost. Now they called him the Watcher. A man who didn't speak because he didn't need to. A man who had already fought enough wars to recognize when a new one was just beginning. The morning after the fire, a strange hush settled over Raven Rock. It wasn't fear. It wasn't awe. It was something older, respect, maybe, or the weight of something long buried finally unearthed. Recruits walked with quieter steps. Instructors exchanged glances, unspoken thoughts passing between them. Jonas Ward, if that was even truly his name, had not returned to his cleaning rounds. His cart stood abandoned at the corner of Wing B, where the fire had blackened part of the concrete wall. A scorched hoodie lay folded neatly on top, the patchwork of soot making the green nearly unrecognizable. Logan Pierce sat in the infirmary with an oxygen mask and bandaged hands. He hadn't said much, but when the senior medic asked him what happened inside the fire, he simply answered, he knew the way out. He didn't even look scared. In the officers' quarters, Captain Rourke stood before the commandant's desk, holding the open personnel file. It felt like holding the ashes of a myth. The man had vanished from records 20 years ago. Rumors claimed he was the only survivor of Operation Black Vortex, a mission so classified it had been scrubbed from the Pentagon servers. No medals. No honors. No burial. Just silence. A punishment? A choice? Why would a man like that end up here? The commandant asked. Rourke didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he finally understood. That evening, as dusk drew long shadows across the courtyard, Ward returned. He wore no uniform. Just a plain black shirt and jeans. No cart. No mop. Just himself. Every recruit stood straighter when he passed. No one dared speak. Even the wind seemed to pause. He entered the gym and, with slow, deliberate movements, began rearranging the equipment. As if nothing had changed. As if saving a life and walking through fire were just part of the routine. But something had changed. Logan stepped through the door and crossed the gym. He stood at attention even though no command had been given. "Sir," he said, voice trembling slightly. Ward didn't turn. "I want to learn. Not just how to fight. How to see like you see. How to move like that." For a moment, Ward said nothing. Then, finally, he looked at him, really looked. Behind the man's calm, behind the silence, was a storm long since weathered. His eyes softened. A nod. Barely perceptible. "Do you start," Ward said quietly, "by listening more than you speak?" Weeks passed. Then months. Ward didn't become an instructor. He never accepted a title. But his presence was magnetic. He watched drills, corrected forms, and occasionally stepped onto the mat to demonstrate something so precise and devastating it left seasoned officers stunned. One night, Logan found a note under his bunk. For words handwritten. Truth doesn't need noise. No signature. Later, as recruits graduated and Ravenrock prepared a new cycle, a single name was engraved into a small, unmarked plaque on the wall beside the gym doors. Ward's silent guardian. No speeches were made. No ceremony. But every new recruit passed that wall. Some asked who he was. Others had already heard. But no one, not even the boldest among them, dared call him Janitor. They called him Shadow. They called him Ghost. But to those who knew what he had done, what he had endured, he would always be the man who taught strength without shouting, and honor without a single medal. He was the weight in their silence. And he never needed anything more. At Ravenrock, stories are carved into walls not with words, but with sacrifice. Jonas Ward never needed applause. He never asked for recognition. His silence spoke louder than medals ever could. In every glance from a trainee, in every breath held during his passing, lived a question too sacred to ask, and an answer carried in his quiet presence. He taught without teaching. He led without leading. And when he disappeared again, as silently as he had come, all that remained was a perfectly folded hoodie on the cleaning cart, and a single note taped to the handle. Carry it forward. You know how. They never saw him again. But Ravenrock changed forever. Because somewhere, in every facility, every classroom, every place where men and women are broken to be rebuilt stronger, someone like Ward might be watching. Be the silent strength. Lead with purpose, not pride. And when no one sees, do what's right anyway. Because true legacy doesn't wear a name. It walks beside you unseen.